An orphan black boy approaches Officer Ethan in a diner and whispers two words that leave him frozen in shock. Instantly, he turns pale and calls for backup. What could the boy have said that triggered such an urgent response? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Officer Ethan Carter sat alone in the corner booth of Joe's diner, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion after a grueling 12-hour shift. The warm glow of the overhead lamp cast a soft light on his weathered face as he savored each bite of his well-deserved cheeseburger. The familiar sounds of clinking plates and quiet chatter filled the air, bringing a sense of comfort to the tired policeman. As Ethan reached for his coffee mug, the bell above the diner's door chimed softly. He glanced up, more out of habit than curiosity, and his eyes fell upon a small figure hesitating in the doorway. It was a young black boy no more than 8 or 9 years old, his eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. The child's clothes were rumpled and his sneakers were scuffed and dirty. He looked around the diner nervously, as if searching for something, or someone. Ethan's cop instincts kicked in, and he found himself watching the boy more closely. Suddenly, the child's gaze locked onto Ethan's uniform. Relief washed over his face, quickly followed by a flicker of hope. With cautious steps, the boy approached Ethan's table, his small hands trembling at his sides. Ethan set down his coffee mug, his full attention now on the child standing before him. The boy's bottom lip quivered as he looked up at the officer, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Help me," the child whispered, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the diner. Those two simple words sent a jolt through Ethan's body. He straightened in his seat, all thoughts of his meal forgotten. The fear in the boy's eyes and the desperation in his voice set off every alarm bell in Ethan's mind. "Hey there, buddy," Ethan said softly, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "What's your name? Are you okay?" The boy glanced nervously over his shoulder before turning back to Ethan. "I'm Aaron," he replied, his voice shaky. "Please, I need help. I'm scared." Ethan's heart clenched at the raw fear in Aaron's words. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of victims, of people in real danger. Whatever this child had been through, it was serious. "It's all right, Aaron," Ethan said, slowly sliding out of the booth to kneel at the boy's eye level. "I'm Officer Carter, but you can call me Ethan. Can you tell me what's wrong? Why are you scared?" Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his face calm and reassuring for Aaron's sake. With a gentle smile, he gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Why don't you sit down, Aaron? You look like you could use a rest," Ethan said softly. Aaron nodded, his small frame trembling as he slid into the booth. Ethan reached for his radio, keeping his movements slow and casual so as not to startle the boy. "Dispatch, this is Officer Carter. I need backup at Joe's Diner on 5th Street. Possible child endangerment situation. Keep it quiet, please," Ethan murmured into the radio, his eyes never leaving Aaron's face. "Copy that, Officer Carter. Backup is on the way," came the crackled response. Ethan turned his full attention back to Aaron, who was fidgeting nervously with the salt shaker on the table. "Aaron, can you tell me what happened? Why are you so scared?" Ethan asked gently. The boy's lower lip quivered as he looked up at Ethan. I ran away," he whispered. "From a bad place. There were other kids there too." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Other kids? Where was this place, Aaron?" "A big house with a red door," Aaron said, his voice barely audible. "They kept us in the basement, but I found a way out through a small window." As Aaron spoke, Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a case of a runaway child. It was something far more sinister. "How many other children were there, Aaron?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Aaron's brow furrowed as he counted on his fingers. "Maybe 6 or 7? I'm not sure. They kept bringing new kids and taking others away." Ethan's mind raced as he pieced together the information. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This was a child trafficking operation, right here in their small town. "You're very brave for escaping and coming to find help, Aaron," Ethan said, reaching across the table to pat the boy's hand reassuringly. Can you remember anything else about the house? Or the people who kept you there? Aaron nodded slowly, his eyes distant as he recalled the details. The house was at the end of a long driveway. There were lots of trees. And he paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. There was a man with a scar on his face. He was mean to us. Ethan nodded, committing every detail to memory. He knew they were racing against time now. The traffickers would soon realize Aaron was missing, if they hadn't already. As Ethan comforted Aaron, the diner's door swung open. 2 police officers entered, their eyes quickly finding Ethan and the small boy huddled in the booth. "Officer Carter?" one of them asked quietly. Ethan nodded, gently squeezing Aaron's hand. "It's okay, buddy. These are my friends. They're here to help." Aaron's eyes widened with fear, but he stayed put, trusting Ethan's reassuring words. Ethan briefed his colleagues in hushed tones, explaining the situation. Their faces grew grim as they realized the gravity of what they were dealing with. "We need to move fast," Ethan said. "Aaron, can you show us where the house is?" The boy nodded bravely, though his lower lip trembled. Within minutes, a small team of officers was assembled. They drove slowly through the outskirts of town, following Aaron's quiet directions. As they approached a long, tree-lined driveway, Aaron's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "That's it," he whispered. "The red door." Ethan's heart pounded as they parked out of sight. He knelt down to Aaron's level. "You've been so brave, Aaron. I need you to stay here with Officer Johnson, okay? We're going to help your friends." Aaron's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. Ethan gave his hand one last squeeze before joining the team. They moved silently towards the house, weapons drawn. On Ethan's signal, they burst through the red door. The sound of shouting and running feet filled the air. "Police, freeze!" Ethan's eyes adjusted to the dim light as he scanned the room. A man with a scar on his face lunged for a back door. Ethan gave chase, but the man was too quick, disappearing into the woods behind the house. Pushing aside his frustration, Ethan turned his attention to the basement. What he saw there broke his heart. 6 children, ranging from about 5 to 12 years old, huddled together in fear. "It's okay," Ethan said softly, holstering his weapon. "We're here to help. You're safe now." As his colleagues secured the scene and called for medical assistance, Ethan helped the children upstairs. Outside, he saw Aaron peeking out from behind Officer Johnson. "Aaron," Ethan called. "It's all right, come here." Aaron ran to Ethan, wrapping his arms around the officer's legs. Ethan knelt down, enveloping the boy in a protective hug. "You did it, Aaron," Ethan whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved them all." As the rescued children were checked over by paramedics, Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of triumph and unease. They'd saved these kids, but the leader was still out there. The case wasn't over yet. As the chaos of the rescue operation settled, Ethan found himself back at the police station, a trembling Aaron clinging tightly to his hand. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the boy's face, accentuating the fear and exhaustion etched there. "It's okay, buddy," Ethan said softly, guiding Aaron to a chair near his desk. "You're safe here." Aaron nodded silently, his eyes darting around the busy room. Ethan's heart ached at the sight of the small boy, so lost and alone in the bustling station. Officer Johnson approached, a stack of papers in hand. "We need to start the identification process," he said, his voice low and gentle. Ethan nodded, turning to Aaron. "Hey, Aaron, we need to ask you some questions, okay? It'll help us find your family." Aaron's grip on Ethan's hand tightened. "I don't have a family," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Ethan knelt down, meeting Aaron's eyes. "What do you mean, buddy?" Aaron's lower lip trembled as he spoke. "I've been in lots of foster homes. Nobody wanted to keep me. Then those bad men took me." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He squeezed Aaron's hand reassuringly. "I'm so sorry, Aaron. That must have been really hard." As the night wore on, they went through the formalities of identifying Aaron. Ethan stayed by his side, offering comfort and encouragement. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that no immediate family would be coming forward. "What's going to happen to me now?" Aaron asked, his voice small and scared. Ethan looked at his supervisor, who nodded knowingly. "You'll stay with me tonight, Aaron," Ethan said, managing a smile. "We'll figure everything out in the morning, okay?" Aaron's eyes widened, a mix of relief and uncertainty washing over his face. He nodded, still holding tight to Ethan's hand. As they prepared to leave the station, Ethan couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility for this brave little boy who had been through so much. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to keep Aaron safe, no matter what. The drive to the safe house was quiet, with Aaron staring out the window, his small frame tense and alert. Ethan glanced at him occasionally, his heart heavy with concern for the young boy who had already endured so much. As they pulled up to a modest 2-story house, Aaron's eyes widened. "Is this where I'm staying?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "That's right, buddy. It's a safe place. No one can hurt you here." They walked up to the front door, where a kind-faced woman greeted them. "Hello, I'm Mrs. Dela Cruz. I'll be looking after you, Aaron," she said warmly. Aaron shrank back, pressing himself against Ethan's leg. Ethan placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's okay, Aaron. Mrs. Dela Cruz is here to help." Mrs. Dela Cruz showed them around the cozy house, pointing out Aaron's room and the kitchen. But Aaron's eyes never left Ethan, following his every move. As they stood in Aaron's new bedroom, the boy finally spoke up. "Officer Ethan," he said, his voice trembling. Are you going to leave me here?" Ethan knelt down to Aaron's level, his heart breaking at the fear in the child's eyes. "I have to go back to work, Aaron," he said gently. "But this is a safe place. Mrs. Dela Cruz will take good care of you." Aaron's lower lip quivered and tears welled up in his eyes. "But what if the bad men come back? What if they find me?" Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He knew he shouldn't make promises he couldn't keep, but something about this boy tugged at his heart. "Tell you what, Aaron," he said softly. "I promise I'll come check on you every day. How does that sound?" Aaron's eyes lit up with a glimmer of hope. "Really? You promise?" Ethan nodded, feeling a strange bond forming with the boy. "I promise. It might not always be at the same time, but I'll be here every day to make sure you're okay." For the first time since they'd met, Aaron's face broke into a small smile. He threw his arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you," he whispered. As Ethan hugged him back, he knew he was making a commitment that went beyond his official duties. But looking at Aaron's relieved face, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. As Ethan drove away from the safe house, his mind wandered to a place he rarely allowed it to go. The sight of Aaron's frightened face stirred something deep within him, unlocking memories he had long kept buried. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, remembering the countless nights he spent in strange beds, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. Ethan had been just a boy, not much older than Aaron, when he lost his parents. The years that followed were a blur of different homes, different families, and always the same feeling of not belonging. At a red light, Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost feel the ache in his chest, the same one he saw reflected in Aaron's eyes. The longing for stability, for someone to care, for a place to call home. It all came rushing back. "I know exactly how he feels," Ethan whispered to himself, his voice thick with emotion. As he pulled into the police station parking lot, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Aaron's hopeful face when he promised to visit every day. He realized that he had made that promise, not just to comfort Aaron, but because a part of him desperately wished someone had done the same for him all those years ago. Ethan sat in his car, lost in thought. He had never allowed his past to interfere with his work before, always maintaining a professional distance. But with Aaron, it was different. The boy's situation hit too close to home, stirring up feelings Ethan thought he had long since buried. A sense of responsibility washed over him. He knew the system, knew its flaws and shortcomings. He had lived through them himself. The thought of Aaron facing the same uncertainties and disappointments made Ethan's heart ache. "I can't let him go through what I did," Ethan murmured, a newfound determination in his voice. He realized that his promise to Aaron wasn't just about checking in. It was about being the stable presence he never had as a child. As Ethan walked into the precinct the next morning, he couldn't help but feel a mix of exhaustion and anticipation. He had spent most of the night thinking about Aaron, wondering if the boy had managed to get any sleep in the unfamiliar safe house. His partner, Detective Minda Hernandez, noticed the dark circles under Ethan's eyes. "Rough night?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Ethan nodded, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Yeah, couldn't stop thinking about that kid, Aaron. He's been through so much." Minda's brow furrowed. "I get it, Ethan. It's a tough case, but remember, we can't get too involved. It's not our job to—" I know, Ethan cut her off, a hint of irritation in his voice. "It's just, I promised I'd check on him every day." Officer Mike Reynolds, overhearing the conversation, chimed in. "Carter, you're treading on thin ice here. Getting attached to victims never ends well. Trust me, I've seen it before." Ethan felt a surge of defensiveness. "It's not like that. I'm just making sure he's okay until we find his family or a suitable foster home. It's temporary." But even as the words left his mouth, Ethan knew they weren't entirely true. The connection he felt to Aaron was growing stronger with each passing hour. He saw himself in the boy's scared eyes, recognized the longing for stability and love. "Look," Ethan said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I appreciate your concern, but I've got this under control. It's just until we sort out his situation." His colleagues exchanged skeptical glances but dropped the subject. As they moved on to discuss other cases, Ethan found his mind drifting back to Aaron. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just another case, more than just another child victim he needed to help. Deep down, Ethan knew his colleagues were right to be concerned. He was getting attached more than he should. But instead of fear or hesitation, he felt a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he felt like he could make a real difference in someone's life, not just as a police officer, but as someone who truly understood what Aaron was going through. As the days passed, Ethan made good on his promise to visit Aaron every day. The safe house, though secure, felt cold and impersonal. Ethan always brought a little something to cheer Aaron up, a coloring book, some crayons, or a small toy car. On this particular evening, Ethan sat with Aaron in the small living room. The boy was quieter than usual, his big brown eyes fixed on the floor. "You okay, buddy?" Ethan asked gently. Aaron looked up, his lip trembling slightly. I don't want to go back," he whispered. "Go back where?" Ethan leaned in, his heart clenching at the fear in Aaron's voice. "To foster care," Aaron said, his voice barely audible. They weren't nice to me." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked softly. Aaron hesitated, then nodded slowly. "The last home. They forgot about me a lot. Sometimes I didn't get dinner because they said they didn't have enough." Ethan's fists clenched involuntarily, but he kept his voice calm. "That must have been really hard for you." Aaron nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "And before that, there was a family that said they wanted to adopt me, but then they had their own baby and they sent me back." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He remembered all too well the pain of rejection, the crushing disappointment of hope turned to ash. "I'm so sorry, Aaron," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't deserve any of that. Not one bit." Aaron looked up at Ethan, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "You won't leave me too, will you?" The question caught Ethan off guard. He knew he shouldn't make promises he couldn't keep, but looking into Aaron's pleading eyes, he couldn't bring himself to give anything but reassurance. "I'm here for you, Aaron," Ethan said firmly. "I'll do everything I can to keep you safe and make sure you're taken care of. I promise." Aaron's small frame seemed to relax a little at these words. He scooted closer to Ethan on the couch, and after a moment's hesitation, leaned against the officer's arm. Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. He gently put his arm around Aaron's shoulders, offering the comfort and protection the boy so desperately needed. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation into the kidnapping ring continued. Ethan threw himself into the case, working long hours to track down every lead. But the leader of the kidnappers remained elusive, always one step ahead of the law. Ethan's concern for Aaron grew with each passing day. The thought of the criminals coming after the boy again haunted his dreams and clouded his waking hours. He found himself checking on Aaron more frequently, sometimes stopping by the safe house twice a day. One evening, as Ethan was leaving the police station, his partner, Officer Rodriguez, caught up with him. "Carter, you need to take a break," Rodriguez said, worry etched on his face. "You're running yourself ragged." Ethan shook his head. "I can't. Not while that monster is still out there. Not while Aaron's in danger." Rodriguez sighed. "Look, I get it. But you're no good to anyone if you burn out, especially not to that kid." Ethan knew his partner was right, but he couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. He nodded absently and headed to his car. At the safe house, Ethan found Aaron sitting by the window, his small face pressed against the glass. The boy's eyes lit up when he saw Ethan, but there was still a shadow of fear behind them. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said softly. "Everything okay?" Aaron nodded, but his eyes darted nervously to the street outside. "I thought I saw someone watching the house earlier," he whispered. Ethan's heart raced. He quickly scanned the street but saw nothing suspicious. Still, Aaron's words sent a chill down his spine. "It's okay, Aaron," Ethan reassured him, even as his own worry grew. "You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you." Aaron looked up at Ethan, his eyes full of trust. "Promise?" "I promise," Ethan said firmly, pulling the boy into a protective hug. As he held Aaron close, Ethan felt a fierce determination well up inside him. He would do whatever it took to keep this child safe, to give him the security and love he'd been denied for so long. As the days passed, Ethan found himself spending more and more time with Aaron. The boy's presence in his life had become a constant, filling a void Ethan didn't even know existed. He looked forward to their moments together, whether it was helping Aaron with his homework or simply sitting in comfortable silence. One evening, as Ethan tucked Aaron into bed, the boy looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. "Ethan?" Aaron's voice was small but filled with longing. Do you think I'll ever have a real family?" The question hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He swallowed hard, his heart aching for the child before him. "Of course you will, buddy," Ethan said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "There's a family out there for everyone." As he left the safe house that night, Ethan's mind raced. Aaron's words echoed in his head, stirring up emotions he'd long buried. He thought about his own childhood, bouncing from one foster home to another, never finding a place to truly belong. Sitting in his car, Ethan stared at the steering wheel, lost in thought. Could he be the family Aaron needed? The idea both thrilled and terrified him. He'd never considered fatherhood before, always throwing himself into his work instead. But now the possibility tugged at his heart. Ethan's fingers tightened on the wheel. He thought about the joy Aaron brought to his life, the way the boy's smile could brighten even his darkest days. But doubt crept in, whispering of his own shortcomings. Was he ready for such a huge responsibility? Could he give Aaron the stability and love he deserved? The weight of the decision pressed down on Ethan. He knew that whatever choice he made would change both their lives forever. As a cop, he was used to making split-second decisions, but this required careful consideration. Ethan closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He realized that his role as Aaron's protector had already evolved into something more. The thought of Aaron being placed with another family, of losing him, made Ethan's chest tighten with an unexpected pain. As the investigation into the kidnapping case continued, Ethan grew increasingly concerned about Aaron's safety. After much deliberation with his superiors, it was decided that the boy would be moved to Ethan's home for better protection. The day Aaron arrived, his eyes were wide with uncertainty as he clutched his small backpack. Is this where you live?" Aaron asked softly, looking around the modest apartment. Ethan nodded, giving the boy a reassuring smile. "It's not much, but it's home. And now it's your home too, for as long as you need it. Over the next few weeks, a comforting routine began to take shape. Each morning, Ethan would make breakfast for them both. Simple things like toast and eggs, or sometimes pancakes on special days. Aaron would sit at the kitchen table, his legs swinging as he watched Ethan cook. "You make the best pancakes," Aaron said one Saturday morning, syrup dripping down his chin. Ethan chuckled, handing him a napkin. "Well, I've had years of practice. Maybe I can teach you sometime." As days turned into weeks, Aaron's demeanor began to change. The constant fear in his eyes started to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism. He began to relax, to laugh more freely, to express his likes and dislikes without fear of rejection. Bedtime became a special ritual. Ethan would tuck Aaron in, read him a story, and then sit with him until he fell asleep. Sometimes Aaron would share bits and pieces of his past, and Ethan would listen patiently, offering comfort when needed. One night, as Ethan was about to leave the room, Aaron's small voice stopped him. "Ethan," he whispered, I feel safe here, with you." Ethan's heart swelled with emotion. He walked back to the bed and gently ruffled Aaron's hair. "I'm glad, buddy. You are safe here. I promise." For the first time in years, Aaron felt a sense of stability. He had a place to call home, a routine he could count on, and someone who genuinely cared for him. The world didn't seem so scary anymore, not with Ethan by his side. As the days passed, Ethan found himself growing more attached to Aaron. The boy's presence had brought a warmth to his home that he never knew was missing. But with this attachment came a nagging worry about Aaron's future. One evening, after tucking Aaron into bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, his laptop open before him. With a deep breath, he began to dig into Aaron's background. He had access to police records and social services files, but what he found left him stunned. Aaron's file was a patchwork of foster homes and brief stays with distant relatives. No one had ever kept him for long. Ethan's heart ached as he read through the reports. Each new home had seemed promising at first, but always ended in Aaron being moved again. The reasons varied: financial difficulties, changes in family circumstances, or sometimes just a lack of connection. But the result was always the same: Aaron, alone again. As he scrolled through the documents, a lump formed in Ethan's throat. There was no mention of any immediate family willing to take Aaron in. The boy was truly alone in the world. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He thought about Aaron sleeping peacefully in the next room, finally feeling safe after so much uncertainty. The idea of Aaron being moved again, of losing that sense of security, made Ethan's chest tighten. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to consider a possibility he'd been pushing away. Could he become Aaron's permanent guardian? The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He had never seen himself as a father figure, but now, with Aaron, everything felt different. Ethan closed his eyes, remembering his own childhood spent bouncing between foster homes. He knew the pain of never belonging, of always being the outsider. Could he really subject Aaron to that same fate when he had the power to change it? As the night wore on, Ethan found himself imagining a future with Aaron as a permanent part of his life. It wouldn't be easy, he knew that. But as he thought about Aaron's smile, his laughter, and the trust in his eyes, Ethan realized that maybe, just maybe, this was meant to be. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself growing more emotionally invested in Aaron's future. The boy's presence had become a constant source of joy in his life, filling a void he hadn't even realized was there. Every morning as he helped Aaron get ready for school, and every evening as they shared dinner together, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. One night, as Ethan was tucking Aaron into bed, he noticed the boy seemed unusually quiet. "What's on your mind, buddy?" he asked gently, sitting on the edge of the bed. Aaron's big brown eyes looked up at Ethan, filled with worry. What if they come back for me?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Ethan's heart clenched at the fear in Aaron's voice. He knew exactly who they were: the kidnappers who had taken Aaron and the other children. The leader was still at large, a fact that had been weighing heavily on Ethan's mind. "Hey," Ethan said softly, placing a comforting hand on Aaron's shoulder. "I want you to listen to me, okay? I promise you I will keep you safe. No matter what happens, I'll always be here to protect you." Aaron's eyes welled up with tears. "Really? You won't let them take me again?" Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He pulled Aaron into a tight hug, feeling the boy's small frame shake with silent sobs. "Really?" he said firmly. "I won't let anyone hurt you ever again. You're safe here with me, Aaron. I promise." As Aaron's tears subsided, he looked up at Ethan with a mix of hope and trust that made Ethan's heart swell. "Thank you," Aaron whispered, his voice small but sincere. Ethan smiled, ruffling Aaron's hair gently. "That's what I'm here for, buddy. Now how about we read a story before bed?" As Ethan read aloud from Aaron's favorite book, he felt the boy relax against him, the fear slowly melting away. In that moment, Ethan knew that his bond with Aaron had deepened even further. He wasn't just a temporary guardian anymore. He was becoming the father figure Aaron had always needed. As Ethan sat at his desk sifting through paperwork, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Detective Martinez, a fellow officer he'd worked with on several cases. The message was brief, but urgent. "Need to talk. It's about Aaron." Ethan's heart raced as he dialed Martinez's number. "What's up?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ethan, you're not going to believe this," Martinez said, his voice tense. "Remember that cold case from 5 years ago? The Riverside disappearances?" Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He remembered it all too well, a series of mysterious disappearances that had haunted him for years. "Yeah, what about it?" "Well, I was going through some old files and I found something. A connection to Aaron's family." Ethan felt the world tilt beneath him. "What kind of connection?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Martinez sighed heavily. Aaron's mother was one of the last people to see the first victim alive. And get this, his father was a person of interest in the case, but he vanished before we could question him. Ethan's mind reeled with the implications. The Riverside disappearances had been a dark chapter in his career, a case that had gone cold despite his best efforts. And now, somehow, Aaron was connected to it all. "There's more," Martinez continued. "The dates of the disappearances. They line up with times Aaron was moved between foster homes. It's like his family was trying to keep him off the grid." Ethan glanced at the photo of Aaron on his desk, the boy's innocent smile a stark contrast to the dark mystery surrounding his past. "What does this mean for Aaron?" he asked, dreading the answer. "I don't know, Ethan," Martinez replied. "But whatever was going on with his family before the kidnapping, it wasn't just random. There's something bigger here." As Ethan hung up the phone, he felt a chill run down his spine. The revelation shook him to his core, raising more questions than answers about Aaron's past and the circumstances that led to his kidnapping. Ethan's mind raced as he sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of old case files. The connection between Aaron and the Riverside disappearances weighed heavily on his heart. He glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight, but sleep was the furthest thing from his mind. With a deep sigh, Ethan opened another file. His eyes scanned the pages, searching for any clue that might shed light on Aaron's past. As he read, a knot formed in his stomach. The more he learned, the more unsettling the picture became. Aaron's parents' deaths had been ruled accidental, a car crash on a rainy night. But as Ethan dug deeper, he found inconsistencies in the reports. Skid marks that didn't match the official story, witness statements that had been overlooked. "This doesn't add up," Ethan muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. He pulled out his phone, looking at a recent picture of Aaron. The boy's smile, once a source of joy, now filled Ethan with a mix of love and dread. He wanted nothing more than to protect Aaron, to give him the family he'd never had. But now, with these new revelations, Ethan felt torn. His role as a police officer demanded that he follow the evidence no matter where it led. But his heart, the part of him that had grown to love Aaron like a son, wanted to shield the boy from any more pain. Ethan's hand hovered over his phone, tempted to call Child Protective Services. It would be the proper procedure given the new information. But the thought of Aaron being taken away, of losing the trust they'd built, made Ethan's chest tighten. "What am I supposed to do?" he whispered to the empty room. As dawn broke, Ethan had made little progress in resolving his inner conflict. The case files painted a disturbing picture. Aaron's parents may have been involved in something dangerous, something that ultimately led to their deaths. And now that danger seemed to be creeping back into Aaron's life. Ethan closed the last file, his heart heavy with the weight of his discovery. He knew he had to make a decision, follow protocol or follow his heart. But for now, all he could think about was Aaron, sleeping peacefully in the next room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around him. As the days passed, Ethan found himself spending more and more time with Aaron. The boy's presence in his life stirred up emotions he had long buried. Memories of his own childhood, of moving from one foster home to another, resurfaced with startling clarity. One evening, as Ethan tucked Aaron into bed, the boy looked up at him with trusting eyes. "Ethan, will you always be here for me?" Aaron asked softly. Ethan's heart clenched. He wanted to say yes, to promise Aaron the world, but years of disappointment had taught him the pain of broken promises. Instead, he smoothed Aaron's hair and said, "I'll do my very best, buddy. I'm not going anywhere if I can help it." As he left Aaron's room, Ethan leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the surge of emotions. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged somewhere, like he had a purpose beyond his job. Aaron had become the family he never had, filling a void he didn't even know existed. At work, Ethan's colleagues couldn't help but notice the change in him. The usually reserved officer now had a spring in his step and a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Carter, you're looking different," his partner, Officer Johnson, commented one day. "It's that kid, isn't it? Aaron's really got under your skin." Ethan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "He's a special boy, Johnson. I never thought I'd feel this way about anyone." Johnson's expression turned serious. "Just be careful, Ethan. You know how these things can go. Don't get too attached." But Ethan knew it was already too late. He was completely dedicated to Aaron, his every thought and action revolving around the boy's well-being. The connection he felt was undeniable, filling him with both joy and fear. Joy at having found a sense of family and fear of losing it all. As Ethan settled into his new routine with Aaron, a dark cloud loomed on the horizon. One afternoon, while at the precinct, Ethan's phone buzzed with an urgent message from his captain. His heart sank as he read the words on the screen. "Carter, we've got intel. The trafficking ring is active again. They're after Aaron." Ethan's blood ran cold. He rushed out of the office, his mind racing with fear for Aaron's safety. As he drove home, his knuckles turned white from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. When he burst through the front door, Aaron looked up from his homework, startled by Ethan's sudden entrance. "What's wrong?" the boy asked, his voice trembling. Ethan tried to compose himself, not wanting to frighten Aaron more than necessary. "We need to move, buddy. Just for a little while. It's not safe here anymore." Aaron's eyes widened with fear, but he nodded bravely. "Okay, Ethan. I trust you." Those words both warmed Ethan's heart and filled him with dread. He couldn't let Aaron down. He wouldn't. Within hours, Ethan had moved Aaron to a secure safe house on the outskirts of town. It was a small, nondescript building with reinforced doors and windows. As they settled in for the night, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every sound made him jump. The creaking of the house, the rustling of leaves outside, everything seemed like a potential threat. Ethan found himself constantly checking the locks, peering out of windows, and keeping Aaron close by his side. Aaron noticed Ethan's unease. "Are you scared?" he asked one evening as they sat together on the couch. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "A little, buddy, but I'm more scared for you than for me. I promise I'll keep you safe no matter what." Aaron leaned into Ethan's side, seeking comfort. "I know you will. You're the bravest person I know." Ethan wrapped his arm around Aaron, pulling him close. As much as he wanted to believe in his own bravery, he couldn't shake the fear that gripped his heart. The thought of losing Aaron to the very criminals he'd rescued him from was unbearable. As the days in the safe house wore on, the strain began to show on Aaron's young face. His usual quiet demeanor gave way to restless nights and worried glances. One evening, as Ethan was tucking him into bed, Aaron's bottom lip quivered and tears welled up in his eyes. "What's wrong, buddy?" Ethan asked softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Aaron's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm scared, Ethan. Not just of the bad guys, but of being alone again." Ethan's heart clenched. He knew that fear all too well from his own childhood, the memories of countless nights in different foster homes, wondering if anyone would ever truly want him, came flooding back. "I don't want to go back to foster care," Aaron continued, his words tumbling out between sobs. "I don't want to be left alone again. Please don't leave me, Ethan." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He gently placed his hand on Aaron's shoulder, steadying himself as much as the boy. "Aaron, look at me," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Aaron's tear-filled eyes met Ethan's, searching for reassurance. "I want you to listen carefully, okay?" Ethan took a deep breath. "I will never, ever abandon you. Do you understand? Never." Aaron nodded slightly, still sniffling. Ethan continued, his voice soft but firm. "I know you're scared. I was scared too when I was your age. I bounced around from home to home, never feeling like I belonged anywhere. But I promise you, Aaron, you belong here, with me." A glimmer of hope appeared in Aaron's eyes. "Really?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "Really," Ethan affirmed, squeezing Aaron's shoulder gently. "We're in this together, buddy. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you. You're not alone anymore." As Aaron drifted off to sleep, comforted by Ethan's promise, the officer quietly left the room. He made his way to the living room, sinking into the worn armchair that had become his nightly refuge. The weight of his words to Aaron settled on his shoulders, but instead of feeling burdened, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he'd never known before. He gazed out the window, watching the streetlights flicker in the quiet neighborhood. For years, Ethan had thrown himself into his work, believing that protecting others was his calling. But now, as he thought about the scared little boy sleeping in the next room, he realized there might be more to his life's purpose. The connection he felt with Aaron was unlike anything he'd experienced before. It was as if all the years of loneliness and searching had led him to this moment, to this child who needed him just as much as he needed Aaron. Ethan couldn't help but wonder if this was fate, if Aaron was the family he had always longed for, but never dared to hope he'd find. With a deep breath, Ethan reached for his laptop. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he typed, "How to become a legal guardian." As the search results loaded, Ethan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He began to read about the process, taking notes on requirements, paperwork, and legal procedures. The more Ethan researched, the more determined he became. He knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be background checks, home visits, and countless forms to fill out. But as he thought about Aaron's smile, his courage, and the trust he'd placed in Ethan, he knew it would be worth every challenge. Ethan spent hours poring over information, his mind racing with possibilities. He imagined Aaron's first day of school, teaching him to ride a bike and celebrating holidays together. These simple, everyday moments that he'd missed out on in his own childhood now seemed within reach. The peaceful night was shattered by the sound of breaking glass. Ethan jolted awake, his heart racing. He knew instantly what was happening. The kidnappers had found them. "Aaron!" Ethan shouted, leaping from his chair and rushing to the boy's room. He burst through the door to find Aaron cowering in the corner, his eyes wide with terror. A masked figure loomed over him, reaching out to grab the child. "Get away from him!" Ethan roared, charging forward. The kidnapper spun around, revealing a face Ethan recognized from wanted posters. It was the leader they'd been hunting for weeks. "You're not taking him," Ethan growled, positioning himself between Aaron and the intruder. The kidnapper lunged at Ethan, throwing a wild punch. Ethan ducked, feeling the air whoosh past his ear. He countered with a swift jab to the attacker's stomach, sending him stumbling backward. "Run, Aaron!" Ethan yelled, never taking his eyes off the threat. Aaron scrambled to his feet, tears streaming down his face. He darted for the door, but another masked figure appeared, blocking his escape. Ethan's heart sank. They were outnumbered. The leader recovered, pulling out a knife. "Hand over the boy," he snarled, "or things will get ugly." Ethan's mind raced. He needed to protect Aaron at all costs. In a split-second decision, he charged at the leader, tackling him to the ground. The knife clattered across the floor. "Aaron, the window!" Ethan shouted as he grappled with the kidnapper. Aaron hesitated, looking terrified at the thought of jumping from the second story. "Trust me," Ethan pleaded, struggling to keep the leader pinned down. With a whimper, Aaron climbed onto the windowsill. Just as the second kidnapper lunged for him, Aaron leaped out into the night. Ethan's heart stopped. Had he just sent Aaron to his death? But there was no time to think. He had to get to the boy. With a surge of adrenaline, Ethan slammed the leader's head against the floor, knocking him unconscious. He then sprang to his feet, charging at the second kidnapper who was now peering out the window. Ethan's heart pounded as he raced down the stairs and out of the house. The cool night air hit his face as he frantically searched for Aaron. Relief washed over him when he spotted the boy huddled beneath a large bush, shaking but unharmed. "Aaron?" Ethan called out softly, approaching slowly. "It's okay. You're safe now." Aaron looked up, his eyes wide with fear and brimming with tears. As soon as he saw Ethan, he scrambled out from under the bush and threw himself into the officer's arms. "I was so scared," Aaron sobbed, burying his face in Ethan's chest. Ethan held him tight, his own eyes misting over. "I know, buddy. I was scared too. But you were so brave." As sirens wailed in the distance, Ethan realized how close he'd come to losing Aaron. The thought made his chest tighten. He couldn't bear the idea of Aaron being taken away. Not by kidnappers, not by the system, not by anyone. In the days that followed, Aaron was quieter than usual. He jumped at every loud noise and refused to sleep alone. Ethan took time off work to stay with him, his protective instincts in overdrive. One night, as they sat on the couch watching cartoons, Aaron looked up at Ethan with serious eyes. "Are you going to send me away now?" Ethan's heart broke. "No, Aaron, I'm not sending you anywhere." "Promise?" Aaron's voice was small, uncertain. At that moment, Ethan knew what he had to do. The next day, he started researching adoption procedures. He filled out form after form, made countless phone calls, and scheduled meetings with social workers. But as Ethan dove into the process, doubt began to creep in. Could he really be a father? He'd never even had a dog, let alone raised a child. What if he messed up? What if he couldn't give Aaron everything he needed? These thoughts plagued him as he sat at his kitchen table, staring at the stack of adoption papers. Aaron was in the living room, happily coloring and humming to himself. The sound made Ethan smile, despite his worries. "Am I ready for this?" Ethan muttered to himself, running a hand through his hair. As the days passed, Aaron's nightmares began to fade. The constant fear that had gripped him since his kidnapping slowly loosened its hold. In Ethan's home, he found a sense of safety he'd never known before. One afternoon, while Ethan was busy with paperwork, Aaron's curiosity led him to explore the house. He climbed the creaky stairs to the attic, his small hands running along the dusty banister. The musty smell of old books and forgotten memories filled his nose as he reached the top. In a corner, tucked behind a stack of boxes, Aaron spotted an old, leather-bound book. He pulled it out, blowing off a layer of dust. Opening it carefully, he realized it was a journal. The handwriting inside was messy but familiar. It was Ethan's. Aaron's eyes widened as he began to read. Page after page told the story of a young Ethan, bouncing from one foster home to another. The words painted a picture of loneliness, fear, and a desperate longing for a place to belong. "I just want someone to keep me," one entry read. "Why doesn't anyone want me?" Tears welled up in Aaron's eyes. He recognized those feelings all too well. It was like reading his own thoughts on paper. When Ethan found Aaron in the attic, the boy was curled up with the journal, sniffling quietly. Ethan's heart sank when he saw what Aaron was reading. "Oh, buddy," Ethan said softly, sitting down next to him. Aaron looked up, his eyes red and puffy. "You were like me," he whispered. Ethan nodded, gently taking the journal. "Yeah, I was. It was hard, feeling like I didn't belong anywhere." Aaron scooted closer to Ethan. Did it ever get better? Ethan wrapped an arm around Aaron's shoulders. It did. It took time, but I found my place. And you know what? I think I finally understand why everything happened the way it did. Why? Aaron asked, looking up at Ethan with curious eyes. Ethan smiled, his own eyes misty. So I could be here for you now, so I could understand exactly what you're going through. Aaron's small fingers traced the faded ink on the journal's pages. He looked up at Ethan, his eyes wide with a mix of sadness and understanding. Can I read some of it to you? He asked hesitantly. Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Sure, buddy. Go ahead. Aaron's voice was soft and shaky as he began to read. Dear Diary, today was another bad day. The new family doesn't want me. They said I'm too quiet, too sad. I don't know how to be different. I just want someone to keep me. Ethan closed his eyes, memories of his lonely childhood washing over him. Aaron continued reading, his voice growing stronger with each word. I wish I had a real family, someone who would love me no matter what, someone who wouldn't give up on me. As Aaron read, Ethan felt a warmth spreading in his chest. He looked at the boy beside him, seeing not just a child he was protecting, but a kindred spirit who understood his pain. Aaron's voice faltered as he reached the last entry. He looked up at Ethan, his eyes brimming with tears. In a whisper so soft Ethan almost missed it, Aaron said, You don't have to be alone anymore. The words hit Ethan like a tidal wave. His breath caught in his throat, and he felt tears stinging his eyes. In that moment, he realized that Aaron saw him not just as a protector or a temporary guardian, but as a father figure. Ethan pulled Aaron into a tight hug, his emotions overflowing. The boy nestled against him, small hands clutching Ethan's shirt. They sat there in the dusty attic, two souls who had found each other against all odds, finally understanding that they were no longer alone. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, staring at the adoption papers spread out before him. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He took a deep breath, picked up his pen, and began to fill out the forms. As he wrote, memories of the past few weeks flooded his mind. The way Aaron's face lit up when Ethan read him bedtime stories, the sound of the boy's laughter echoing through the house, and the feeling of Aaron's small hand in his as they walked to the park. These moments had filled a void in Ethan's life he didn't even know existed. Hey, buddy, Ethan called out softly. Can you come here for a second? Aaron padded into the kitchen, his eyes curious. What is it, Ethan? Ethan patted the chair next to him, and Aaron climbed up, peering at the papers on the table. Remember when we talked about me becoming your guardian? Ethan asked gently. Aaron nodded, his eyes widening with understanding. Well, Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. I've decided I want to adopt you. To be your dad, if that's okay with you. Aaron's face broke into a huge smile, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Really? You want to be my dad? Ethan nodded, feeling his own eyes well up. More than anything in the world, buddy. Aaron threw his arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him tightly. I've never had a real family before, he whispered. Ethan hugged him back, his heart swelling with love. Well, you do now, Aaron, and I promise I'll always be here for you. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Aaron navigated the adoption process together. They met with social workers, attended court hearings, and filled out countless forms. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Aaron snuggled close to Ethan. Dad? He said softly, testing out the word. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Yeah, son? I'm really happy you found me, Aaron said, his voice full of contentment. Ethan pulled him closer, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment wash over him. Me too, buddy. Me too. The next morning, Ethan woke up early to make breakfast. He wanted to surprise Aaron with his favorite pancakes. As he mixed the batter, he heard the soft patter of feet coming down the stairs. Good morning, sleepyhead, Ethan said with a smile as Aaron shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. Morning, Aaron mumbled, climbing onto a chair at the kitchen table. He watched Ethan pour the batter onto the griddle, the sweet smell of pancakes filling the air. As they sat down to eat, Ethan noticed Aaron pushing his food around on his plate, looking thoughtful. "Everything okay, buddy?" he asked gently. Aaron nodded, but then hesitated. He took a deep breath and looked up at Ethan, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Can I ask you something?" Ethan put down his fork, giving Aaron his full attention. "Of course, Aaron. You can ask me anything." Aaron fidgeted with his napkin, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was wondering, is it okay if I call you Dad?" Ethan felt his heart swell with emotion. He hadn't expected this moment to come so soon, and it caught him off guard. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at the little boy sitting across from him, the child who had changed his life in ways he never thought possible. "Aaron," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion, "I would be honored if you called me Dad." Aaron's face lit up with the brightest smile Ethan had ever seen. Without hesitation, the boy jumped up from his chair and threw his arms around Ethan's neck. "I love you, Dad," he whispered. Ethan hugged Aaron tightly, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I love you too, son," he replied, his voice cracking with emotion. As they held each other, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The walls he had built around his heart over years of loneliness began to crumble. In that moment, he knew that he and Aaron were truly becoming a family, healing each other's wounds with love and trust. As the days passed, Ethan and Aaron began to settle into their new life together. The house that once felt empty to Ethan now buzzed with the energy of a growing family. They started to form new routines, finding comfort in the simple moments they shared. Every morning, Ethan would wake up early to make breakfast for Aaron. The smell of pancakes or scrambled eggs would drift upstairs, gently rousing Aaron from his sleep. They'd sit at the kitchen table, talking about their plans for the day and sharing silly jokes that made them both laugh. After school, Ethan would pick Aaron up, and they'd head to the park. Aaron, who had been shy and reserved, started to come out of his shell. He'd run to the swings, calling out, "Dad, watch me go high." Ethan's heart would swell with pride every time he heard Aaron call him Dad. In the evenings, they'd work on Aaron's homework together. Ethan, patient and encouraging, would help Aaron with his math problems or listen as he practiced reading aloud. These quiet moments of learning and bonding brought them closer, building trust and understanding between them. As Aaron began to feel more secure in his new home, he started to express himself more. He'd share stories from school, his hopes, and even his fears. One night, as Ethan tucked him into bed, Aaron whispered, "I used to be scared of the dark, but I'm not anymore, not with you here." Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Ethan found himself opening up too, sharing stories from his own childhood that he'd never told anyone before. Aaron listened with wide eyes, sometimes offering a hug when he sensed Ethan needed one. They created new traditions together. Every Friday night became movie night, complete with popcorn and blanket forts in the living room. Saturdays were for exploring. They'd visit museums, go hiking, or try new restaurants in town. These shared experiences filled their home with laughter and love, healing old wounds and creating new, happy memories. Ethan spent days planning a special celebration for Aaron, wanting to mark the beginning of their new life together. He invited close friends and colleagues, hoping to surround Aaron with a supportive community. On the day of the party, Ethan woke up early to decorate the house. He hung colorful streamers and balloons, transforming their living room into a festive space. Aaron helped, his small hands carefully placing paper plates and cups on the table. "Is this all for me?" Aaron asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Ethan knelt down beside him, ruffling his hair gently. "It sure is, buddy. We're celebrating our family." As guests started to arrive, Aaron shyly hid behind Ethan's leg. But soon, the warmth and kindness of the visitors put him at ease. Ethan's partner from the police force, Officer Sarah, brought a big teddy bear for Aaron. His eyes lit up as he hugged it tightly. "Thank you," he whispered, a small smile tugging at his lips. the house filled with laughter and chatter. Ethan's colleagues shared funny stories from work, making Aaron giggle. His teacher, Ms. Thompson, praised Aaron's progress in school, making the boy beam with pride. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan brought out a cake decorated with the words, "Welcome home, Aaron." The room fell silent as everyone gathered around. Aaron stared at the cake, his eyes wide with wonder. "Make a wish, son," Ethan said softly, his hand on Aaron's shoulder. Aaron closed his eyes tight, took a deep breath, and blew out the candles. The room erupted in cheers and applause. When Aaron opened his eyes, he was smiling, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. It was the first time in a long while that he truly felt like he belonged. Ethan's heart swelled with joy as he watched Aaron surrounded by people who cared about him, laughing and enjoying himself. This was more than just a party. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan found himself standing in the doorway, watching Aaron play with his new teddy bear on the living room floor. The sight filled him with a warmth he'd never experienced before. Later that night, after tucking Aaron into bed, Ethan sat in the quiet of the living room. Colorful streamers still hung from the ceiling, and a few stray balloons bobbed gently in the corner. He picked up a framed photo from the coffee table, a snapshot of him and Aaron at the park, both grinning widely. Ethan's mind wandered back to that fateful night in the diner when a scared little boy had whispered, "Help me." He never could have imagined how those two simple words would change his life forever. He thought about the man he used to be. A dedicated cop, sure, but also a loner who kept everyone at arm's length. The orphan in him had never truly healed, always expecting to be left behind. But Aaron had changed all that. Ethan realized that in trying to save Aaron, he had saved himself too. The boy's trust and love had slowly chipped away at the walls Ethan had built around his heart. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly needed, truly loved. He remembered the moment Aaron had asked to call him Dad. The word had filled a void in Ethan's heart he didn't even know existed. It wasn't just Aaron who had found a family. Ethan had too. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he understood the profound impact this unexpected turn in his life had brought. He was a better person now, more patient, more understanding, more open to love. Aaron hadn't just needed a protector, he had needed someone to protect, someone to love unconditionally. Ethan smiled to himself, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together. He was no longer just Officer Carter, the stoic cop. He was Dad, and that was the most important job he'd ever have. As the months passed, Aaron settled into his new life with Ethan. The once shy boy began to blossom, finding his place both at home and at school. Ethan watched with pride as Aaron threw himself into his studies, his grades steadily improving with each passing week. One afternoon, Ethan arrived home to find Aaron hunched over his textbooks at the kitchen table. "Hey, kiddo," Ethan said, ruffling Aaron's hair. "How's the studying going?" Aaron looked up with a grin. "Great, Dad, I got an A on my math test today." Ethan's heart swelled at the word Dad. It still felt new and wonderful every time Aaron said it. "That's fantastic, Aaron. I'm so proud of you." But it wasn't just academics where Aaron was excelling. The boy had discovered a passion for basketball, spending hours practicing in their drive-away. His dedication paid off when he made the school team. Ethan never missed a game, cheering from the sidelines as Aaron raced up and down the court. He marveled at how confident Aaron looked, a far cry from the frightened child he'd met in the diner. One Saturday, Ethan drove Aaron to a neighboring town for a big game. As they walked into the school gym, Aaron grabbed Ethan's hand, squeezing it tight. "Nervous?" Ethan asked gently. Aaron nodded. "A little, but I'm glad you're here, Dad." Ethan knelt down, looking Aaron in the eye. "You've got this, champ. Just do your best out there, okay?" Aaron nodded, his face set with determination. Ethan watched as his son joined his teammates, marveling at how much Aaron had changed. The scared, withdrawn boy was gone, replaced by this confident, happy child. As the game began, Ethan couldn't help but reflect on their journey. Every basket Aaron scored, every high five he shared with his teammates, was a testament to how far they'd come together. Ethan wasn't just proud of Aaron's accomplishments. He was proud of the resilient, kind-hearted boy Aaron had become. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the city park, Ethan and Aaron strolled hand in hand along the winding path. The trees rustled gently in the evening breeze, their leaves a vibrant tapestry of reds and golds. It was a perfect autumn day, crisp and clear. Ethan glanced down at Aaron, marveling at how much the boy had grown in the past few months. Gone was the scared, withdrawn child he'd first met. In his place was a confident, happy young man with a bright future ahead of him. Aaron's face was relaxed, a small smile playing on his lips as he watched a pair of squirrels chase each other up a nearby oak tree. Ethan felt a surge of love and protectiveness wash over him. This boy, who had come into his life so unexpectedly, had changed everything. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. The park was quiet, with only a few other people out for an evening stroll. It was their special time, a moment of peace after the excitement of Aaron's basketball game earlier that day. As they rounded a bend in the path, Aaron suddenly stopped. He looked up at Ethan, his dark eyes shining with an emotion that made Ethan's heart skip a beat. "Dad?" Aaron said softly. "Yes, son," Ethan replied, giving Aaron's hand a gentle squeeze. Aaron took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. Then, in a voice filled with sincerity and warmth, he said, "I love you, Dad." Ethan felt his eyes well up with tears. He knelt down, pulling Aaron into a tight hug. "I love you too, Aaron," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "So very much." As they embraced, Ethan marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. He thought about the lonely, guarded man he'd been before Aaron came into his life. He thought about the scared little boy Aaron had been, and how far he'd come. Pulling back slightly, Ethan looked into Aaron's eyes and smiled. In that moment, he realized a profound truth. Sometimes, family finds you when you least expect it. Their unlikely bond had healed wounds they both carried, filling empty spaces in their hearts they hadn't even known existed. If you enjoyed the story of Officer Ethan and Aaron, I hand-picked this next story that will touch your heart. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.